Hey there, viewers. The jury was supposed to see this trial through to the end, but one after another members are being excused, and it isn't for the usual reasons. Court insiders say a single discovery inside the deliberation room turned everything upside down. Whatever it was, the judge cleared the benches in record time, and the lawyers are scrambling to contain the fallout. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The Wrong Juror Got the Text. It was only supposed to be 2 weeks. That's what they told us when they handed us the little white folders and scanned our IDs at the security desk. 2 weeks, maybe 3. I was a substitute teacher, not exactly overwhelmed with work, and I figured serving on a jury might give me something else to think about besides which 4th grader was trying to eat glue or who needed their mom called. But I should have known the second I walked into that deliberation lounge that nothing about this trial was going to be normal. They make it look so polished on television. The long, polished tables, the quiet respect of the courtroom, the gavel, the judge. But real court smells like printer toner, cold coffee, and the kind of old building you can't quite disinfect all the way. The deliberation lounge had a carpet that always felt a little damp, and the vending machine was out of every normal snack. Only powdered donuts and plain sunflower seeds, as if someone was deliberately trying to keep us hungry and distracted. We weren't allowed to talk about the case in the lounge, but that didn't stop people from talking about everything around it. About Diddy's shoes, about his expression, about whether the woman sitting 3 rows behind the prosecutor was that Cassie girl. I didn't say much. I never really do, unless I'm with kids. But I watched. I watched everything. That's probably why I noticed the coffee cup first. It was a tall paper cup, standard lid, black ink smudged on the side like someone had been holding it with too much pressure. At first I thought it was one of mine. I bring my own sometimes, write my name with a Sharpie just in case someone grabs the wrong one. But this cup wasn't mine. It said my name, Lena, but the handwriting was too careful. Perfect cursive, like something from an old cat. My mom was the only person who ever wrote my name that way. But she died 5 years ago. I looked around to see if maybe one of the other jurors had brought it as a joke. Juror No. 4, Mitch, was always playing little pranks, switching people's seat labels, leaving sticky notes with fake messages on their folders, but when I asked him, he gave me a weird look and said he hadn't even been in yet. That morning, I had been the first person in the lounge. The cup was still warm. I didn't drink it. I just left it there, on the corner of the table, and sat down in my usual chair. Every morning we had to swipe our badges when we entered. A little green light blinked when you were approved, and a dull red light buzzed when you weren't. Simple. But today, when I swiped my badge, the light blinked twice. Green, then yellow, then green again. The security guard didn't say anything, just nodded me through like usual. When I asked him if something was wrong with the reader, he didn't even look at me, just said, "Sometimes the system runs a redundancy. It's just checking you against previous cycles." Previous cycles? I didn't know what that meant. I didn't ask. It wasn't until lunch that I saw the sketch. Rosa, the courtroom artist, usually sat near the windows and barely spoke. She was old, maybe in her 60s, and her hands shook when she reached for her pencil. But her drawings were always perfect, better than photographs in some strange way. That day, her folder was left open on a bench by accident. I don't think she meant for me to see it. I was walking by to get a cup of tea when I glanced down and froze. It was my face. Not kind of like me, not someone who resembled me, but me. My earrings, my hair pulled into that nervous half-up thing I do when I'm thinking too hard. But my mouth was gone. Not closed. Gone. Like someone had drawn me and then erased the lips, the jawline, the chin. Just an empty smudge where my lower face should have been. Rosa came back a moment later and picked up the folder. I didn't say anything. I just walked away. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something had started to settle under my skin like a slow itch I couldn't scratch. I kept thinking about that coffee cup, the blinking badge light, and now the sketch. I reached for my phone, intending to scroll through something stupid just to calm my brain. That's when I saw the message. It was sitting in my inbox like it had always been there. A no number. Are you juror no 6? If not, what did you see during the playback? At first I thought it was some kind of scam, but the next message made me drop the phone. Unknown number. Lenny Bean, you shouldn't have watched it. Nobody had called me that in over 20 years. My dad used to call me Lenny Bean when I was a kid. It wasn't something I ever wrote down, not on social media, not on resumes, not even in text. It was a name spoken in private moments. Bedtime, when I was sick, or when he was feeling soft after a hard day. My dad passed away 2 summers ago, and I hadn't heard anyone say that name out loud since. I stared at the message for what felt like hours. I thought about deleting it, but something stopped me. I took a screenshot instead. I stared at it again in the morning, hoping maybe I'd dreamed it. That day in court, Juror No 6 was dismissed. He'd lied about his residency, they said, claimed he lived in both New Jersey and the Bronx, conflicting records. The judge asked a few questions and the lawyers argued, and then it was over. He stood up, shook his head, and left without a word. But just before he walked out, he looked directly at me. Not like a glance, not like a goodbye. A look, long, focused, knowing, and then he mouthed something. It wasn't for you. After court, I asked to speak to the judge in private. I didn't even know if I was allowed to, but the bailiff said he'd pass the message along. I sat in an empty conference room for half an hour before Judge Subramanian came in, alone, no robe, just his shirt sleeves rolled up and a tired look in his eyes. I told him everything. About the message, the nickname, the coffee cup, the sketch. I showed him the phone. He didn't ask to see it. He didn't ask who I'd told. He just leaned forward, elbows on the table, and said, "Sometimes information flows where it shouldn't. You did the right thing by bringing it forward." But the way he said it, flat, almost bored, made me feel worse, not better. Like I was one of many who had sat here before. Like this wasn't even new. I asked him if there was going to be an investigation. He said, "We're reviewing the phone logs and security feeds." But when I asked if I was safe, he paused too long before answering. "You're not in any danger, Miss Ray," he finally said, but it sounded like he was reading it from a card. That night, I didn't check my phone. I turned it off. I left it in a drawer. But at 3:21 a.m., I woke up with a start and turned it on again, just to check. No new messages. Nothing unusual. Until I opened the original thread again. The messages had changed. The old ones were still there, but now at the bottom was a new line. "You weren't supposed to receive this, but you already watched the verdict." I stared at it for what felt like forever. My hands were shaking. I wanted to call someone, my sister, a friend, anyone, but I didn't know how to explain it. I hadn't seen any verdict. The trial wasn't even close to being over. And yet, part of me knew it wasn't a mistake. Not anymore. Chapter 2. Dismissed for candor. Most nights I stay late. That's just how I work. The court empties, the noise fades, and I can finally think. During trials like this, ones that crackle in the air even when no one's talking, it's almost a relief to have the silence stretch out across the halls. The building hums differently at night. You get to know the rhythm of it, like the heartbeat of something old trying to keep order, no matter what storms are swirling just outside. Tonight, I had the blue key. That meant sealed access. It's rare, used only for evidence that never makes it into public record. Notes that need to be filed where no one can casually browse. Judge Subramanian handed it to me quietly before leaving his chambers. He didn't say much, just that I needed to update the Cycle 6 archive. He rubbed the side of his temple like he had a migraine and said, "Use Tier B, no cloud log." I didn't ask why. I never do, as part of the job. You see the things no one else does, and you keep your mouth shut. I've been doing this over 20 years. Most clerks don't last more than 5. The ones who do all learn the same lesson. Don't look too long at what doesn't make sense. Just file it, seal it, move on. Down in sublevel 2, the air always smells like burnt copper. The doors are heavy, reinforced, and the light bulbs overhead buzz just a bit louder than they should. The blue key opens the archive terminal tucked away in a room with no windows, no cameras, and no live feeds. I brought a thermos of coffee and a folder of flagged items that had been sitting in the queue for days. The first document I opened was the dismissal memo for Juror No. 6. His name had been redacted, but the notes said he'd offered 2 different addresses during screening, one in the Bronx, one in Jersey, and never clarified when questioned. The form said residency conflict, but that wasn't the part that got my attention. There was a short addendum from court security that read, "Tonal mismatch during playback suggests altered delivery." That was not standard language. Tonal mismatch? Playback? Jurors aren't normally recorded, not outside the courtroom anyway, and their voices sure as hell aren't analyzed for tone. The next file was worse. Juror No. 3. Her memo said she'd been seen responding visually to an unoccupied seat during multiple sessions. She'd started whispering during recesses, even though no one was sitting beside her. The report didn't say what she was whispering, but attached was a courtroom sketch drawn during the 4th day of testimony. I recognized Rosa's work. Sharp pencil lines, heavy shading. It showed the jury box in full, but something was off. Juror No. 3 was turned, head tilted, eyes focused not forward but slightly to the left. Her mouth was parted like she was mid-sentence. Everyone else in the sketch looked normal, but the spot beside her was just blank. No outline, no erased mark, just empty paper. I set the sketch down and took a slow sip of coffee. The terminal in front of me was old, one of the kind that creaks when you type too fast. I used the blue key again to unlock the deeper layer, the sealed drive Judge Subramanian had personally flagged. The label said, Cycle 6, Jury Review, Internal Only. When the file loaded, I expected video, maybe audio, but it wasn't that. It was text. Just a stream of plain black letters on a gray screen, updating one line at a time. The first sentence described me, not just what I had done, but what I was doing. Clerk sits down, opens first memo, reaches for thermos. My hand froze. I scrolled down. The next line appeared right after. Pauses, frowns, begins reading aloud. Hadn't spoken a word yet. I looked over my shoulder. The room was empty as always. Just the hum of the overhead lights and the faint ticking of the wall clock. But when I turned back, more lines had appeared. She looks toward the door. Nothing there. She leans closer to the screen. I didn't remember typing anything. I tried to exit the document, but the screen flickered, then stabilized. Another line appeared. He tries to break the loop. I leaned back, trying to collect myself. Maybe the terminal was glitching. Maybe someone had programmed a training simulation and mislabeled it. But then, why did it know what I was doing? I decided to check the file's metadata. The system didn't let me. Instead, a second window opened automatically. No clicks, no command keys, just a silent shift, like the terminal had a mind of its own. It was labeled, Redline Juror File Visual Leakage Confirmed. The document showed still images, low resolution, black and white, time-stamped but fuzzy. The first was a shot of Juror No. 6, seated in the box. Nothing unusual at first glance, except for the background. It wasn't the courtroom wall. It wasn't the judge's bench. It was me. I was sitting at this very terminal. Same chair, Same folder of memos beside me, same blue thermos in hand. My image was faint, like it had been caught through mirrored glass, but it was unmistakable. I clicked to the next image. Juror No. 6 was standing now, facing directly into the camera. His expression was unreadable, but there was a gesture. One hand raised, palm open, as if signaling to someone unseen. Again, in the background, I saw myself. This time I was mouthing something. I leaned in to read the faint transcript caption at the bottom of the image. She has already filed it. Filed what? I didn't remember ever opening a playback log, let alone sealing one under a red line code. I clicked forward one last time. The third image showed an empty jury box. Every seat was unoccupied, but in the reflection above the gallery rail there was a figure. Me again, but older, hair pulled back, same glasses I wore today. This time, I wasn't mouthing anything. I was staring straight ahead, staring at myself. I closed the file and tried to reset the system. That's when the standard prompt appeared. Would you like to record a memo for archive? My hand hovered over the keyboard. I thought about logging a basic note, just enough to cover my tracks. But instead, I clicked yes and leaned forward. I didn't plan what I was going to say, I just spoke. This is the judge's clerk. Entry timestamp late June 16th. Reviewing sealed juror documents flagged under Cycle 6. Something's off in the transcripts. They're following my behavior. They're predicting it. Red line file includes images that show me in the playback, even though I haven't been recorded. Something is wrong with the sequence. I don't know if this is a simulation error or a data corruption. I stopped there. My voice had started to shake. I hit save. The system chirped its usual confirmation. I went to log the file in the internal archive, but when I opened the listing, it was already there. Identical title, identical file size. Logged 5 minutes earlier. Same recording, same words, but I hadn't recorded it yet. I read the first sentence, my voice just as I had spoken it, only the next line was different. It wasn't part of the memo I had just given. She realizes she's not logging the archive. She is the archive. I tried to delete it. The system didn't respond. I pressed escape. Nothing. The cursor blinked once. Then a new line began to type itself. She will forget this happened until she files the next. The screen dimmed. In the quiet, I could still hear the hum of the fluorescent lights above me, but it felt quieter somehow, like something in the room had stopped watching, or maybe started waiting. I didn't know what to do with that silence, so I did what I always do. I filed the folder, and I left. Chapter 3, Sketchbook 6. I've been drawing courtrooms since before some of these attorneys were born. 35 years, 3 boroughs, and 1 eye less than I started with. There's a rhythm to this job, one that doesn't change no matter who's on trial. Doesn't matter if it's a mob boss, a crying widow, or a celebrity in silk. People in court all move the same when they think someone's watching. Upright, stiff, careful, like they can shape their own guilt or innocence with posture alone. But this trial, this one's wrong. I've been sitting in the same spot in the gallery every day since the start. I bring 2 sharpened pencils, a backup graphite stick, and a thermos of mint tea. I sit behind the leftmost railing with a view of the jurors' faces, the witness box, and just enough of the defendant to capture his silhouette. I never draw what I don't see, that's the rule, even with the one bad eye. I lost sight in the left one 10 years ago. I've never needed a reference beyond what's in front of me. Until Juror No. 4. I can't get his face right. Every day, I start the same way. Sketch the courtroom's outline, capture the light. Then I start with the bench, the judge's profile, and work left to right through the jury box. No. 1 through no. 12. But by the time I get to no 4, something goes wrong. I'll draw his chin, glance up to check, and it's different. I'll shade in his brow, look again, and he's already shifted. Not physically, not like someone changing position. It's more like the details I just recorded were never there to begin with. Once I thought maybe it was me. I'm not young anymore. The eye is unreliable. Maybe the medication's blurring things. But yesterday I finished a full sketch and left it on the bench beside me while I went to the restroom. When I came back, the page was gone. In its place was a sheet I didn't recognize. Same paper, same book, but the drawing was different. It was me, sleeping, not in the courtroom. In my bed, head tilted to the side, mouth slightly open. The kind of image you could only capture by standing directly over me while I slept. I stared at it for a long time. I don't remember drawing it. I don't remember even thinking about that pose. But the details were exact. The frayed pillowcase, the scar above my lip, even the way my hair flattens on one side when I sleep on it too long. I tore it out and slipped it into my bag. I haven't shown anyone. Today, I arrived early. Before the doors opened. I needed to reorder the pages. Somehow the entire sketchbook had shuffled itself overnight. My date labels were out of sequence, and 3 of the pages had ink on them that I never used. I always sign my name in pencil. These had ink. My name, same signature. But I didn't write it. I sat down and tried to breathe through the noise. When the court fills, it hums, not with volume but with presence. Shuffling coats, shoes against wood, someone's cough echoing too long. But this room, it's too silent. Even when it's full, the quiet wraps around the edges like insulation, like something's pressing down on it from above. I started sketching Diddy as he took the stand. I've drawn him before, years ago at an awards show, though that sketch never made it to publication. Back then, his face was tighter, more alert. Now, it hangs like a mask someone else used to wear. The lights hit him differently. Every shadow sinks deeper. I moved to the center of the page, focused on his collarbone, the angle of his shoulders, and just as I began the shading, something happened. My pencil tip snapped. Not like it hit the edge of the page or slipped. It cracked, loud and sudden, even though I wasn't applying pressure. I looked down, irritated, and reached for a replacement from my bag. But before I touched it, I noticed the paper. It was bleeding. A thin red line was seeping from the center of the page. Not ink, not watercolor. It was red like blood, but too uniform, too clean. I ran my finger across it, dry, already absorbed. I flipped the page over, expecting to see the next sheet ruined. But there was something else instead. A second face, faint, underneath the one I had been sketching. Not erased, hidden, a layer deeper than the surface, the faint outline of a juror. Not Diddy, not the witness, one of them. The juror was crying, mouth twisted, eyes swollen. I couldn't tell which one it was. The face was too soft around the edges. It looked like someone caught mid-sob, frozen in graph. I stared at it until someone called my name. It was the bailiff, asking if I was all right. I nodded, told him I was just fixing a smudge. But my hand kept shaking. I closed the book, not quickly, but gently, as if sealing it would stop whatever was leaking out. I didn't draw for the rest of the session. When court adjourned for the day, I packed up slowly. Usually I leave my sketches on the gallery table to be copied by the press officer. It's routine. They photograph them, scan them, sometimes blow them up for news coverage. I always know exactly what I'm handing over. But not today. Somehow, I passed a drawing to the judge's assistant without realizing I'd done it. She thanked me, nodded, and walked it toward the bench. I tried to stop her. I opened my mouth, raised my hand, but the words didn't come out. And by the time I got her attention, the judge was already unfolding it. I saw his eyes narrow. He turned it slightly, tilted it, said something low under his breath. Then he stood up and left the courtroom. Asked the assistant if I could see what I had handed over. She hesitated, then flipped the page so I could peek at the corner. It was a drawing of Juror No. 6. Being pulled through a mirror. Not a window. Not a door. A mirror. His hands reaching out toward nothing. His body caught halfway between two reflections. One version of him screaming. The other, smiling. I don't remember drawing it, but my signature was at the bottom, in ink. When I got home that night, I laid the sketchbook on the kitchen table. I didn't open it. I just watched it. It looked heavier than usual, like the pages inside had multiplied, like it was waiting. I thought about the drawing of myself sleeping. I wondered if someone had been standing over me again. Chapter 4. Cycle 6. Contaminated. It was supposed to be a temp contract. 3 weeks, maybe 4. Just long enough to pad my resume and get the security clearance that would make the next job easier to land. I'd worked back-end archive jobs before. Mostly hospital data pulls, disaster footage, scrubs for compliance. Court stuff wasn't that different. You didn't look at the content, you ran checksum validations, encrypted the files, migrated formats, confirmed playback integrity, then he logged the job and moved on. But federal archives have a smell, like old stone, dust, and something vaguely metallic beneath it all, like solder that never cooled properly. My first day in Vault B3, the guy training me handed over a thumb drive and said, "Don't mess with anything labeled Cycle 6. No explanation, just that, and a sarcastic half smile like he didn't expect me to listen anyway. His name was Carson. He quit 2 days later, said the lights were giving him migraines. I didn't ask questions. I was there to do a job. The system in B3 runs a layered architecture. Surface-level cases go to digital cloud mirrors, but legacy trials, anything with classified annotations, red-line testimony, or sealed juror visuals, go through the local cold servers. Those had to be updated manually. The interface was a relic from the early 2000s. Blocky fonts, low-resolution thumbnails, laggy frame scrubbing. But it got the job done. Most files were standard deposition recordings, room angles, time-stamped logs. Until I hit the folder labeled Playback Session, Cycle 6, Sealed Juror Feed. At first, it wouldn't open. The system spat out a redundancy conflict, something about timestamp mismatches. That can happen if the footage wasn't synced correctly, or if metadata got corrupted. I ran a standard repair protocol, no luck. Then I tried force authentication from the local override port. The screen blinked, then showed a black window with a single white square in the center. No controls, no menus, just that blank square. I stared at it for a while. Then it started to play. It wasn't trial footage. There was no judge, no lawyers, no questioning. Just the jury box. Empty at first. The camera angle was unusual, lower than standard, like it had been mounted beneath the gallery rail. A few seconds in, Juror No. 2 entered, then No. 4, then 6. They took their seats, but no one moved. They weren't talking. They weren't adjusting papers or chatting quietly like usual between sessions. They just sat there, completely still, and they stared directly into the camera. Not like they noticed it by accident, like they were waiting for it to turn on. The footage ran for 17 minutes, no dialogue, no courtroom activity, just the jurors, sitting, watching. Every minute or so, one would blink, but the others didn't. At the 10-minute mark, Juror No. 6 tilted his head to the left and whispered something. The audio had to be boosted manually. I used waveform isolation to clean it up. What he said was this: "We've already rendered verdict. This is just the echo." I replayed it, ran it through noise filters to be sure. Same phrase, same tone. I opened the official transcript from that date. There was no note of Juror No 6 speaking at all during breaks, no record of his voice at that timestamp, no reason he should have been mic'd, and yet, there it was, clear as day, like he was delivering a line he'd said 100 times before. I flagged the file and moved on to the next one. Just another day of ghost code and half-broken videos. Or so I told myself. But the second file was worse. This one opened without a fight. The label read, Cycle 6, Juror Sync, Session Preload. At first, it showed a wide-angle shot of the courtroom before the day's session. Lights off, empty chairs, no movement. Then the image skipped, like an old VHS hiccup, and now the jury box was full. The timestamp hadn't changed. No one entered. The jurors were just suddenly there. And they weren't sitting like they normally did. Their heads were all turned, each at a different, slightly unnatural angle. One looking up, one to the floor, one with eyes closed, lips moving as if in silent prayer. Juror No 9, Lena, I think her name was, had her hands folded tight, knuckles white, and her mouth open, mid-scream. But there was no sound. I checked the audio levels. Nothing was muted, nothing was missing. The file had a full sound range, just complete silence. I scrubbed forward. The footage looped at 19 minutes. Started over without a hitch. I watched again, this time frame by frame. I looked closely at the reflections in the glass behind them, the polished wood near the gallery rail. At the 20-second mark, one of the reflections was wrong. It wasn't reversed. Reflections in that panel always mirror the subject, but Juror No 6's reflection wasn't flipped. It was facing forward, mouth moving out of sync with the image on screen. The reflection whispered something completely different. It said, "Cycle reset failed, viewer not indexed." That's when I stopped the tape. I sat there, hands hovering over the keyboard, suddenly aware of how loud my breathing sounded in the room. There were no windows in Vault B3, no clocks, just the screen and me. I opened the root folder again and ran a reverse search on every instance of Cycle 6 across the archive system. It didn't just show trial footage. There were incident reports, security audits, technician logs that had been redacted. Most of them referenced anomalies, playback desync, audio desaturation, memory loop corruption. One of them had a notation, "Do not assign multiple viewers per instance. Echo retention risk." I didn't know what that meant, not fully, but it made me nauseous to read. I stood up, paced the room, tried to shake off the buzz crawling up the back of my neck. When I turned back to the screen, the footage had changed again. Now it showed the technician's booth. My booth. The view was from overhead, like a security cam, but I hadn't activated any internal cameras. This room wasn't supposed to have them. And sitting in my chair, staring directly at the screen, was me. Only I wasn't moving. I was frozen, hands resting on the desk, mouth open slightly like I'd just started to say something but stopped midway. And on my shirt, clipped to the collar, was a small, laminated badge I hadn't seen before. It said, Juror No 6. I staggered back. My real badge, Federal Media Technician Tier 2, was still clipped to my belt. I touched it, felt the plastic, checked the barcode. Normal. But the screen showed something else entirely. The playback image blinked. For a single frame, the figure in the chair turned to face the camera, not slowly, not naturally, like a puppet whose strings had been yanked hard. Its mouth moved. I didn't hear words, but I saw the shape. It said, "Welcome back." The screen cut to black. I left everything as it was. Didn't log the session, didn't save the buffer. I walked out of Vault B3 and didn't look back until I hit the elevator. That night, I dreamed I was sitting in a jury box, but the courtroom was empty. Just me and 12 chairs, all facing forward. And in every reflection, I saw myself. Chapter 5. The girl who wasn't picked. I didn't think they'd call me. Honestly, I didn't think they'd even get that far. I was an alternate, part of the warm-up act. One of those random names plucked from a spreadsheet, herded into a courtroom just so the real ones could be picked. I remember sitting in that echoey room with the carpet that smelled like copier paper, waiting for the attorneys to look me up and down and decide I was either too young or too flaky to trust with a federal trial. They were right, kind of. I didn't care about court stuff. I cared about getting back to the fashion internship I'd landed 2 months ago, styling racks, showroom prep, photographing jackets no one could afford. That was my world, not padded benches and sealed envelopes. But lately, I've been dreaming about it, every night. Same room, same jury box. I'm always in seat no 6, not watching, sitting, wearing a pale blue shirt I've never owned and holding a pad of paper that I never write on. The courtroom is silent. Everyone else is blurred out like they're made of fog or smudged pencil lines. But me, I'm in focus, sharper than real life. At first I thought it was just stress. Something about being excused early must have unsettled me more than I realized, or maybe it was the weird look the bailiff gave me when he said, "You're dismissed, but stay reachable." He'd said it too softly, like he was trying not to disturb something in the air between us. But the dreams didn't stop. They got stranger. In one, I turned to speak to the person next to me, only no one was there. The seat was empty, but I could hear breathing, close, wet, as if someone was right behind my ear. When I looked forward again, the judge wasn't a judge. It was a mirror. And in the reflection, I wasn't blinking. I woke up shaking. My mouth tasted like paper. I tried not to think about it. I deleted the court reminder emails, tossed the jury information packet. But then, 2 weeks later, I got a notice in the mail. Unclaimed juror stipend. I didn't even remember qualifying for one. I'd only been there for screening, a single day. But the envelope had my name on it, printed in blocky courthouse font, with a note that said, "Final disbursement, cycle 6. Cycle? Not session, not batch, cycle. That night, I had the dream again. Only this time, I wasn't sitting in the jury box. I was standing in front of it, like an exhibit, and the people seated inside weren't blurred anymore. They were all me. 12 versions of myself, hair tied different, outfits I haven't worn in years, expressions I didn't recognize, all of them staring, all of them mouthing the same word over and over. Returned. I didn't sleep after that. I went back to the courthouse, told myself it was just for the check, but I wore nicer clothes, subconsciously dressed like someone who belonged there, like someone who might walk into a courtroom again and not feel like a fraud. The security desk was mostly empty. A yawning guard waved me forward, asked for my name, then flipped through a drawer of lanyards and returned with something strange. He smiled. "You left this behind." It was a juror badge, laminated, worn around the edges, but not the standard temp ID. This one had a number on it. Juror 96. I laughed awkwardly, told him he must have grabbed the wrong one. But he looked at me and said, "That's what you were issued, right? You're on the log?" I asked to see the log. He turned the tablet toward me. My name was there, plain as anything, logged in under that juror number, entered on a date I wasn't even there. I pointed that out. He shrugged. "Sometimes they reassign seats. Happens all the time. System just tracks the last registered number." I nodded like that made sense, took the badge. It felt warm. After he walked away, I didn't go to the stipend window. I turned left. toward the corridor I remembered from screening day. The hallway with the thick carpets and pale doors, the ones that led to viewing rooms and side entrances. Most of them were locked, but one was slightly open. I pushed through. The air inside was stale, like books and photocopier dust. No one was there, just a courtroom sitting cold and empty in the late afternoon light. I stepped inside, slowly, shoes echoing. I knew I wasn't supposed to be there. Knew someone could show up any second and bark at me to leave. But I didn't care. I walked down the aisle, up toward the jury box. The seats were all vacant. I stared at them like they might breathe. Then I saw it. On the judge's bench, laid flat and half covered by a sheet of manila paper, was a sketch, one of Rose's. I'd seen her working during the screening, always tucked in the corner, hand moving like a metronome. I didn't want to touch it. I just leaned forward. It was me. Not just a drawing that looked like me, down to the scar on my eyebrow I got falling off a bike when I was 6, the dimple that only shows when I'm nervous. And in the sketch, I wasn't sitting in the jury box. I was being escorted out of it. 2 figures, faceless, had me by the arms. My mouth was open like I was screaming. One shoe was off, and in my lap was the juror badge I now held in my real hands. Number 6. I backed away, my breath caught. Behind me the door clicked. Latered. No one was there. I looked back down. The sketch was gone. Not misplaced. Gone. I ran. Didn't wait to see if the guard noticed. Didn't care if the stipend went unclaimed. When I got outside, the sunlight felt wrong, like a light bulb instead of the sun. Later that night, I checked my calendar app. It had a reminder for the trial date, the one I never got picked for. It was labeled "Re-entry begins, seat confirmed." The badge is still in my purse. I don't remember putting it there. Chapter 6. Dismissal isn't removal. Most people think the shoe is where noise goes to die, but the real truth is that silence gets loud in there. It expands, it creeps down your ears and behind your teeth until every breath you take sounds like it doesn't belong to you anymore. I've been working special housing in MDC Brooklyn for 8 years. I've seen what a week in solitary does to a man. Seen grown men cry over fluorescent lights that never shut off. Heard muttering start slow and build into screaming that makes you wish for thicker walls. But I've never seen anything like him. They logged him under inmate 37,452-54 tucked into Tier 2 CHU without a word to the regular COs. We got a memo at shift change, said he was a psych evaluation hold, temporary placement, not under investigation, no charges, just administrative containment clearance pending. I'd been working Tier 2 rotation all week. At first, I thought the new guy was just some pre-trial case who'd lost it. Happens sometimes. They bring in federal witnesses, toss them in here when they're too shaky to be kept with Gen Pop. But I knew something was off when his intake file came with a white envelope, sealed, unmarked, placed on top of the usual stack. Warden said not to open it. But when night shift came and most of the cams were set to loop, I took a look. Inside was a single page, printed in red across the top. Visual playback contamination, status, unlooped. I didn't know what that meant. Below it, a line of details. No prior criminal record, name scrubbed, but one field stood out. Previous designation, Juror No. 6. I froze when I saw it. This wasn't a witness. This was one of them. From the Diddy trial, the one who got dismissed for lying about his address. Except now he wasn't dismissed. He was locked down. Alone. And he hadn't said a word since arriving. The first time I did a walk past his cell, I expected him to be asleep. Most new holds don't eat or talk the first day. But he was awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor, not pacing, not fidgeting, just watching the wall. Not the camera, not the door, the wall, like it was playing a show only he could see. The light inside his cell flickered, just once, then stayed steady. I leaned closer to the door slot. He didn't blink. His lips were moving, no sound, just a steady movement, like he was reciting something memorized. I called into Central to request an audio check on his cell mic, standard practice if a detainee might be unresponsive. They pinged back, mic active, no sound detected. I leaned in again, his mouth still moving. I mouthed back, "What are you saying?" For the first time, he turned toward me. And he smiled. A quiet, slow thing, not threatening, not scared, just... like he'd been waiting for me to ask. He mouthed 5 words. I'll never forget them. And was the verdict, were the playback. Then he looked away. The next few days got stranger. I started seeing things in the corridor glass, reflections that didn't match up with where I was standing. During my round on Tuesday night, I passed by his cell again, and the wall behind him had this faint sheen, like wet cement. But it wasn't wet. It was reflecting, just enough to catch his outline, just enough to show that when he leaned toward the wall, the shape in the reflection didn't match. It wasn't him. It was someone else entirely. Older, wearing a Gal uniform. A uniform just like mine. I blinked, stepped back, looked again. The reflection had gone. I checked the hallway camera footage the next day. Nothing unusual. He didn't move all night, just sat there, hands resting on his knees, eyes fixed on the same slab of concrete like it held a screen only he could read. I asked the warden again about the file, about the term unlooped. He told me to drop it, said some things don't make it into reports for a reason. Thursday night, I found a sketch shoved under the break room door. No envelope, no note, just the sketch. It was a drawing of the shoe corridor, down to every detail. The paint chip above cell 23, the missing screw in the 3rd vent, even the stain on the floor where inmate Hurst had thrown up last summer. But there was something else. Every cell door had a name. My name, printed 12 times. And in each cell, drawn carefully in graphite, were 12 versions of me. Some crying, some asleep, one screaming into nothing. I took the sketch to the incineration bin and burned it. Didn't report it. Didn't tell anyone. This morning, when I came on shift, I noticed something else. The nameplate on cell 23, the one where Juror No. 6 had been placed, was gone. Replaced with a new tag. And it said Officer Reyes. My name? I tapped my ID against the security panel. Red light, no access. Even though I'd been cleared for Tier 2 all week. I tried again. Red light, no access. Then I heard it. A voice, not loud, not angry, just steady. We've already rendered verdict. This is just the echo. I turned. No one was there. I checked the monitor feed. The cell was empty. But the bed was still warm. Chapter 7. Thestenographers Silence. I've never missed a word. Not once. Not in 39 years of sitting behind the steno mask. It's not just a point of pride. It's who I am. I don't speak much outside of court, but in the courtroom I become something else. Fast, focused, unshakable. The rhythm of real speech is different when you've listened this long. You stop hearing words and start hearing pattern. It's like music, and I never lose the beat. Until now. The courtroom was empty when I returned. I always stay behind after the day's sessions to clean up my log files, recheck the digital transcripts against the machine, and export any flagged phrases that might have gotten muddled. Usually I find nothing. A stutter here, a dropped "ah" there. Rarely anything serious, but today, something was wrong. Deeply wrong. The transcription looked clean at first, hour by hour, speaker by speaker. Witness testimony, objections, cross-examination. I ran my finger down the column, letting the sentences drift past like scrolling lyrics. But then I noticed it. A missing block. Roughly 10 minutes, completely blank. No timestamps, no speaker names, just a skip from one moment to the next, like the courtroom had simply gone silent. But I remember the sound. Not what was said, no. That's the thing. I remember noise, movement, the shift in air when people react, the collective intake of breath, the subtle scraping of heels against wood. Juror No. 8 gasped. I remember that. And the bailiff turned his head like he didn't want to look. Or how did my transcript say nothing happened? I reopened the live audio file. I don't usually review audio, it's a redundancy. But I needed to hear what I apparently didn't write. There it was. Room ambiance. Chair creaks. A cough. The low, high-pressure silence of a courtroom bracing for impact. And then voices, but not the ones I expected. The first was soft. Too soft to belong to the witness. Not projected, not mic'd, just a whisper near the jury box. It was the verdict, where the playback. It came again, louder, layered like a second track spliced over the original. Another voice followed. Female. Juror No. 9, I think. Her voice cracked in a way I'd heard before. Usually when someone's trying to pretend they're not afraid. Did you see the mirror? It didn't reflect the judge. And then nothing. But the courtroom hadn't been silent. That 10-minute block was full of movement. There was a motion on the floor, a sidebar, an objection. I know, because my muscle memory flinched at every beat of it. I checked my stenotype machine. I never shut it down during session. It logs everything even when I'm not actively writing. I reviewed the digital roll. That section was typed, but not by me. The keystrokes were there, stamped in exact intervals. Uniform, inhuman. Too perfect to have been mine. And when I opened the raw file, the words weren't courtroom dialogue. They were this, Jury Session Cycle 6 Playback Entry. Initiate Visual Archive. Silence breach detected. Remove excess witness input. Confirm medium stability. My stomach turned. I reached into my drawer to grab the backup thumb drive. That's when I saw the note. It wasn't typed, it wasn't printed. It was handwritten, tucked between two archived rulings in the rear of the drawer I rarely use. The paper was folded once, neatly. On the outside, my name, not the full one, just the shorthand used in internal records. M. Albright. I opened it. You don't remember typing this because you weren't meant to. You weren't the witness, you were the medium. I read it 3 times, trying to breathe. My mouth felt dry. I looked around the courtroom, still empty, still safe, still mine. But suddenly, it didn't feel like my space anymore. The walls seemed farther away, the benches taller. The door behind the judge's bench looked newer, as if it had just been installed. I tried to stand. My legs resisted. I sat again. My fingers hovered over the stenotype keys. And then they moved. Not in a glitch, not a twitch, not tremors. They typed, on their own, as if my muscles were being pulled by a string I didn't know I had. Letter by letter, the words appeared on the screen. Playback confirmed. Then the next line. Verdict archive. And one more. Witness loop engaged. I couldn't stop. I pulled my hands away. They trembled in my lap. The screen cleared itself. A new prompt appeared. A question. Was the silence accurate? Underneath, yes/no. I didn't click anything. I closed the machine, packed my bag, left the courtroom without logging out. But as I walked past the bench, I noticed something carved into the wood, something that hadn't been there before. 3 words etched clean into the finish. Chapter 8. He wasn't the juror. He was the playback. I was only gone for 3 weeks. A routine medical leave. Nothing serious. Just fatigue, some pressure behind the eyes, and a few dizzy spells that wouldn't go away. The doctor chalked it up to overwork. "Step away from the terminals," he said. "Let your brain forget the glow of that screen for a while." I listened. I slept. I went home and watched the leaves change through my apartment window. No emails, no calls. But the whole time I kept dreaming about the courthouse. Not the court itself, not the judge or the defendant, or the whispers about the trial. Just the administrative room on the 3rd floor, jury processing, my desk, the rows of sealed drawers and coded boxes, the specific sound of my badge beeping as I passed through the scanner. In the dreams, it was always empty. The lights flickered too often, and something sat on my desk pulsing like a heartbeat. I could never see what it was, but I'd wake up with my hands clenched into fists. They called me back yesterday, said they needed someone trusted to close out the Cycle 6 file. Most of the other administrators had rotated off after the trial, either reassigned or just quietly shuffled out. The supervisor didn't say why, just told me the room was waiting and the keys were where I left them. They came in after hours, part of the contract. They didn't want daytime staff around while sensitive files were being processed. I didn't mind. I preferred the building empty, quieter, cleaner, the kind of silence that wraps around you, not the kind that stabs at your ears. The elevator took too long, always does. The lights overhead stuttered on as I stepped out onto the floor. The motion sensors were late catching me, as if they'd forgotten anyone was supposed to return. Tapped my badge. Eat. But the light turned yellow before it turned green. Never seen that before. The door to jury processing clicked open. I stepped inside. Everything was as I left it. The smell of old paper and polished metal. The buzz of inactive servers sleeping under the desks. My nameplate half faded from cleaning wipes. I moved slowly, fingers trailing across the table as I walked. The file cart beside my desk was empty, except for one sealed container. It was matte black, no label on the outside, just a small silver tag along the seam. Cycle 6. Witness loop, playback seed. I didn't remember authorizing a seed box. Usually those were for surveillance reconciliation or archive reviews, never for jury storage. I entered my PIN, turned the lock. Inside, there were only 3 items. A pair of red leather gloves, a courtroom sketch, and a USB stick. No brand name, no color, just the word verdict engraved in brushed steel, and underneath it, a label scratched in someone's handwriting. Viewer designate you. I stared at the sketch first. It was me, seated in the gallery, facing the jury, hair pulled back the way I wear it during intake days. My expression was unreadable, neutral, too neutral. Like someone had drawn it without knowing what emotion to give me. My hands were folded in my lap, and in them I was holding the red gloves. I dropped the sketch onto the desk, not dramatically, just with enough carelessness that I felt it leave my fingers, like peeling off a layer of myself. I picked up the USB, plugged it into the secured terminal. No loading bar, no security prompt, just a blank screen. Then it started. Footage began to play in perfect silence. The courtroom, the jury box. One by one, each juror stood up, from 12 to 1, and exited in reverse. Their faces blinked in and out, lips moving but unspeaking, eyes not quite synced to their movement. The playback wasn't rewinding, it was undoing. The seats didn't empty. They forgot they were ever filled. I watched, frozen, as Juror No. 6 unraveled. His body didn't just vanish, it turned transparent. First his hands, then his mouth, then his eyes. Until the only thing left of him was a shape in the shadow. A dent in the bench. The camera angle shifted somehow, from the ceiling to the gallery. The footage showed me, not just someone who looked like me. I was sitting where the sketch had placed me, watching the jury, still, silent. Then the screen glitched, a flicker, a pulse, and a sentence began to type, slow and deliberate in the center of the screen. You weren't filing dismissals, you were selecting witnesses. I tried to reach for the keyboard. I don't know why, to stop it, to close the file, but I couldn't move my hand. My fingers locked. My lungs pulled tight, like the air around me had turned into something heavier, like I was underwater, trying to breathe memories. The screen cleared itself. A new line appeared. Playback begins now. The room lights dimmed. Not all at once, one panel at a time, as if someone was walking past them and flicking them off behind me. I turned to look. Nothing there. But in the reflection on the blank monitor, I saw something I shouldn't have. My face, tearing back. But this time, I was wearing the red gloves, and my mouth was moving. No sound came out, but I knew what I was saying. Knew it the same way you know a dream is going to end just before it does. I was never the administrator, I mouthed. I was the entry point. The screen turned black. Then a pulse. Then nothing. And then I saw again. But not from the desk. From inside the playback. The walls shimmered, the lights were already off, the bench was already occupied, the sketch was already filed. The verdict had been archived. I blinked, and the file played again. Only this time from behind my own eyes.